Alder Ridge was the kind of town where people remembered your grandparents' names, but still refused to talk about the things that lived in the woods. The mountains around the town bent the wind in strange ways, carrying echoes that didn't match the voices that made them. Lysa Branton had grown up hearing stories, but she never believed any of them. Not the tale about the creature that copied lost hikers. Not the warning about something that knocked on windows at night, but left no footprints. And especially not the old legend of the echo taker, the thing that learned your voice and then used it against you. But everything changed the day she saw Joren Pike on the school steps. He sat alone, shoulders hunched, hands clenched together so tightly his knuckles were white. His dark, uncommon eyes darted around like he expected someone or something to appear at any second. Lysa had known Joren since 7th grade. Quiet and strange, but good-hearted. He had always carried sadness like a second shadow, but today, that sadness looked like terror. When she called his name, he flinched so hard his backpack slipped off his shoulder. "Lysa," he whispered. "It found me again last night." Lysa sat beside him, trying to act calm even though his trembling scared her. "Joren, what are you talking about?" she asked. His voice shook as he explained that something had been calling his name outside his bedroom window for 3 nights straight. At first he thought it was just the wind twisting through the pine trees, but then it said things only his mother knew about him. It mentioned the scar on his shoulder from when he fell off a bike at age 8. It mentioned the lullaby she used to hum when he couldn't sleep. The way Joren described it made Lysa feel sick. He said the voice sounded almost human, but just a little too slow, too deep, as if it was trying to learn how to move through his throat. "It sounded like me last night," Joren whispered. "It called my name using my own voice." Lysa grabbed his arm. "You need to tell your mom." But Joren shook his head quickly. He said his mother was working night shifts and barely believed him when he mentioned weird noises before. "I can't tell her," he said. "It told me if I talk, it will go inside the house." That afternoon, the sky over Alder Ridge dimmed early, the sun sinking behind jagged cliffs that made long shadows reach across the streets. Lysa walked home with Joren, even though he insisted she didn't need to. She couldn't let him walk alone, not while shaking like he was freezing, even though the air was warm. The path to his house cut through a stretch of tall pines where branches clustered so tightly sunlight struggled to touch the ground. As they walked, Joren kept glancing over his shoulder. Every small sound, a snapping twig, rustling leaves, a distant branch falling, made him twitch. "It watches me from the woods," he said quietly. "Always behind the trees. Always waiting until it gets dark." Lysa tried to comfort him, saying maybe it was just a deer or some local animal, but Joren stopped walking and looked at her with hollow eyes. "No animal can learn your voice," he whispered. "No animal can whisper the names of the people you love." The silence between them thickened. Lysa felt the sensation that the forest wasn't empty, that something stood far back between the trunks, blending into the deep green, listening. When they reached the Pike house, the place felt colder than the rest of the neighborhood. The small, weathered cabin sat near the tree line, its windows slightly fogged from the inside. Joren paused at the steps. "It comes here when the moon rises," he murmured. Lysa stared at him, her chest tightening. She wanted to run inside and grab his mom, forcing her to take this seriously. But Joren grabbed her wrist suddenly. "Please don't go," he begged. "It doesn't like new people. It makes me angry." Lysa frowned. "How do you know that?" His jaw trembled. "Last night, it said your name." Her heart dropped. It whispered, "Lysa," right outside my window, like it was practicing your voice too. Lysa felt chills run down her spine. She looked behind her toward the darkening forest, and for a moment she thought she saw a shape between the trees, a tall, bent silhouette shifting its weight like it was learning how to stand. But when she blinked, it was gone. "Joren, you can't stay here tonight," she said. "You need help." But Joren backed toward the door. "No, if I leave it will come looking." The wind picked up, brushing through the pine needles like soft fingertips. Lysa felt something watching them, even though she couldn't see it. Joren opened his front door slowly, as if expecting the creature to already be inside. Before stepping in, he turned to her with eyes full of fear and something worse, resignation. "It wants me," he whispered. "It chose me." Lysa shook her head fiercely. "No, we're going to fix this. You're not alone." But Joren's expression didn't change. "Promise me something," he said quietly. "If anything happens to me, don't follow the voice, even if it sounds like me." Lysa swallowed hard. "Joren, nothing is going to happen to—" A sharp snap echoed from the woods. Both of them froze. The noise didn't sound like a branch. It sounded like bones. Joren's breathing hitched. "It's early," he whispered. "It never comes before dark." Lysa stepped closer to him. "Get inside," she said. "Lock the door." Joren hesitated, then nodded. As he closed the door, Lysa felt the weight of the forest pressing against her back. The wind carried a low, broken whisper through the trees, something trying to form her name. She didn't look back. Lysa didn't go home right away. She stood on the gravel road outside the Pike house, long after Joren closed the door, staring at the dark line where the forest began. The pines swayed slowly, brushing together like they were whispering secrets. She kept replaying Joren's last words. "Don't follow the voice." She told herself she didn't believe any of these creatures that copied voices. Things that lingered in the woods, echoes that weren't real echoes. But then she remembered how Joren's hands trembled, how his voice cracked like he hadn't slept in days. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, painfully wrong. As she finally started walking toward her own house, the sky had darkened into a deep blue, the early evening melting into night. Streetlights flickered on one by one, but they didn't push back the darkness like they usually did. Lysa felt like the shadows were following her, like something in them was observing, waiting. When she reached the small wooden bridge that crossed Alder Creek, she heard something behind her. A soft shuffle, a slow inhale. She froze. "Joren?" she whispered, even though she knew he wouldn't have followed her. The answer came in her own voice, distorted, too low. "Lysa." Lysa spun around instantly, heart pounding so hard she tasted metal in her mouth. But no one was there. Only the pine trees shifted gently under the windless sky. She backed away slowly, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had imagined it. She kept telling herself that as she hurried home, practically running up the road. Her house came into view, small and warm with the porch light glowing softly. Usually that sight comforted her. Tonight, it didn't. She rushed inside and locked the door immediately, breathing hard. Her mother wasn't home from work yet, so the house was too silent. Lysa pressed her back against the door and slid down, hugging her knees. Her hands shook so badly she had to hold them against her legs. After a few minutes, she forced herself to move to her window. She wanted to check the road, the trees, anything that would prove the voice she heard was just stress or exhaustion. But when she pulled back the curtain, she felt her entire body freeze. Down the road, right before the woods began, stood a shape. Tall, thin, too crooked to be human. As if sensing her gaze, the shape slowly turned its head. Lysa dove away from the window. She crawled to the living room, pulling her phone from her back pocket. Her hands shook as she typed Joren's name, and she pressed the call button before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then someone answered, but it wasn't Joren. It was his voice, yes, but not him. The tone was slow, dragging, as if it didn't quite know how to shape the words. "Lysa." Lysa's throat closed. "Joren? Joren, is that you?" The thing on the other end made a sound like scraping wood. Come here. Lysa's breath hitched. A cold wave crawled down her spine. She could hear something else to find? No. Breathing. Heavy. Wet. Too close to the microphone. She hung up so fast the phone slipped from her fingers. It hit the carpet, screen still glowing with the call log. She stared at it like it was a snake. Her brain spun wildly. How did it use his phone? Did it take him already? Was he just too scared to answer? She wanted to call back, but the memory of that voice made bile rise in her throat. Instead, she sent him a text. Are you okay? Please answer. Seconds passed. The reply came. Come outside. No punctuation. No explanation. No emojis. Just the words, come outside. Lysa backed away from her phone like it might explode. Her heart thrashed painfully in her chest. She grabbed a kitchen knife not because she really believed it would help, but because holding something solid made her feel less helpless. The house creaked softly as the temperature dropped, the air becoming colder than it should have been. She walked to her window again, her breath shaking. She peeked through a tiny space in the curtain. At first, she saw nothing. Then her eyes adjusted. A figure stood in her driveway. Not at the door, not near the fence, but directly under the porch light where it wanted to be seen. Its limbs were long and stiff, as if its joints weren't connected the way a person's should be. Its skin looked like pale clay stretched too thin, and its face, oh God, its face was shifting, slowly melting into something that faintly resembled Joren. The jaw was too wide, the eyes are too dull, like painted glass. But the shape of the hair, the angle of the cheekbones, it was trying to wear him, trying to become him. Then it opened its mouth, and Lysa heard her own voice spill out. Lysa, open! Lysa stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. Panic surged through her chest like fire. The creature tilted its head at the sound, studying her through the window like a hunter learning the movements of prey. She clamped a hand over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Tears blurred her vision. She didn't know what to do. Call the police? Run? Hide? None of those felt safe. None of those felt possible. The creature slowly lifted one long arm and placed its hand against the front door, not knocking, just resting its fingers there, as if waiting for the chance to push its way inside. Lysa's phone buzzed again. Another text from Joren. If you don't open, I'll come in anyway. Another followed. I'm cold. Let me in. Lysa choked on a sob. That wasn't Joren. It couldn't be. Her real friend wouldn't speak like that, wouldn't act like that, wouldn't stand in her driveway wearing a broken version of his own face. Then another message came. This one made her blood freeze. I know you hear me. Your mother won't be home for another hour. And then, the last one. You are alone, Lysa. But Lysa knew she was not alone at all. Lysa pressed her back against the wall, trying to breathe slowly even though her chest felt like it was being crushed. Her fingers tightened around the kitchen knife until her knuckles turned white. Outside, the creature didn't move for several long seconds. It stood unnaturally still, its stretched skin catching the porch light like old paper. Then, slowly, too slowly, it dragged its fingers across the front door. The scraping was soft, but each sound crawled under Lysa's skin like insects. It wasn't trying to break in. It was testing, listening, learning. She swallowed hard and forced herself to stay silent. But her phone buzzed again. The vibration echoed through the quiet house, and the creature's head snapped toward the window instantly. The motion was sharp and wrong, like a broken puppet yanked by strings. Lysa's breath caught. She crouched down, reached for her phone with trembling fingers, and turned the volume all the way down. Another text flashed on the screen. I can hear you. Open the door. Lysa felt cold sweat drip down her back. She didn't reply. She didn't move. Outside, the creature leaned closer to the door. It whispered in Joren's voice, "Let me in." Lysa couldn't stay here. She knew it. Every instinct screamed that remaining inside the house would trap her. But she also knew stepping outside meant facing whatever waited. Her heart hammered as she crawled toward the hallway, away from the windows. She needed help. Real help, not the police, because how could she explain this without sounding insane? She needed Joren. She needed to know if he was alive. She grabbed her keys from the counter, her hands shaking so hard they jingled. The scraping sound at the front door stopped. Silence filled the house like thick smoke. Lysa froze. Then tap. A single, slow tap against the living room window. Lysa. The voice was softer now, like it was whispering through a throat full of water. Lysa forced herself to stay calm. Her only chance was the back door. She tiptoed quietly down the hallway, avoiding every loose board she knew would creak. She reached the back of the house and unlocked the door as quietly as she could. The cold night air rushed in. The backyard was dark, but safer than staying inside with that thing pressing its face against her windows. Lysa clutched the knife, sucked in a breath, and stepped into the night. The moment she reached the yard, she stuck close to the shadows. Her house sat on the edge of town, with another row of pines only a few yards away. Their dark branches swayed like fingers brushing the sky. Lysa hurried down the narrow path behind her home, heading toward the main road that led to Joren's neighborhood. Her breath came out in white clouds, even though the night wasn't cold enough for that. Something about the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, filled with static that made the hairs on her arms rise. She forced herself not to look back. She kept telling herself, "Don't look, don't look, don't look." But when she reached the wooden fence at the end of the yard, she heard it. A soft crunch of leaves, then another. Something was behind her. Lysa spun around, knife ready, expecting to see the creature, but nothing stood on the grass. Instead, the sound came from the roof. She looked up slowly. A pale shape crawled across the shingles, limbs bending like broken branches. Its head twisted unnaturally, face turning toward her, even though its body faced the opposite direction. It whispered in her own voice. "Don't run." Lysa ran. She didn't look back. She didn't breathe. She sprinted across the yard, jumped the fence, and bolted toward the main road as the creature scrambled across the roof behind her like a massive spider. Her lungs burned, and panic blurred the world around her. She kept hearing the thing's limbs thudding in strange patterns, like it didn't understand how running worked but was trying to learn as it chased her. She reached the road and didn't stop. Her shoes slapped the pavement as she raced toward Joren's side of town. Every few seconds she glanced behind her. The rooftops were empty. The yards were empty. The trees were still. But that didn't comfort her, because she heard it, her own voice echoing through the dark. Lysa slowed down. She ran faster. Her breath came out in sharp gasps. By the time she reached the turn leading to the Pike property, her legs shook so badly she almost fell. The forest around Joren's house was darker than usual, as if the shadows were thicker, heavier. The moonlight barely reached the ground. The air felt colder. And then she saw at Joren's house. All the lights were off. Every window was open. Lysa stumbled forward, her heart pounding so violently she felt dizzy. The door of the Pike house hung slightly open, moving gently with the breeze. She stopped at the edge of the yard, terrified to step closer, but even more terrified to walk away. "Joren?" she whispered weakly. There was no answer, only the creaking of the open windows drifting in the cold night air. She forced herself to keep moving. Each step felt heavier than the last. The porch groaned under her weight as she approached the door. "Joren, please be here." Then she heard it, a faint sound from inside. Breathing. Not normal breathing. Slow. Wet. Like something trying to mimic the rise and fall of lungs. Lysa's stomach twisted. She held the knife tightly and pushed the door open wider. The house was dark and cold, the air thick with silence. Her eyes adjusted slowly. The living room was empty. The hallway was empty. But then she heard a soft whisper coming from Joren's bedroom. "Lysa," her own voice, coming from the darkness. Lysa's knees nearly gave out, because she realized something horrifying. The creature hadn't chased her here. It had returned home. Lysa froze in the hallway, her chest heaving. The soft whisper of her own voice from Joren's bedroom made her skin crawl. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't. She couldn't leave Joren in there alone. She gripped the knife tighter, the metal cold and heavy against her palm, and inched toward the door. The sound of slow, uneven breathing grew louder as she moved. Each step felt like walking through water. Every floorboard creak was amplified in the silent house. She reached the bedroom doorway and stopped. The door was slightly ajar, the hinges barely moving. She could see shadows inside, stretching unnaturally across the walls. The voice whispered again. "Lysa, come closer." It sounded almost gentle, almost like her real voice. Lysa shook her head violently, trying to clear the illusion. She forced herself to step forward. Each step brought the whisper closer to her ears. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. The room felt wrong, heavy, like the air itself was pressing down. Her stomach churned, and she wanted to scream but couldn't. She had to see what was inside. The moment she pushed the door fully open, the temperature dropped sharply. A cold, unnatural wind swept through the room, rattling the blinds and tossing papers across the floor. On the bed, the sheets were perfectly arranged, as if no one had slept there, but the shadows across the walls moved independently, twisting and bending like living smoke. Then she saw it. Standing in the corner, pale and crooked, was the creature. Its limbs bent at impossible angles. Its face shifted constantly, morphing into a twisted reflection of Joren's features, his eyes dark and empty, and the voice it poured out from the creature's chest. Not just Joren's voice, but snippets of her own, mixed with his mother's and father's. "Lysa, Joren. Come closer." Her stomach turned. She took a step back, but the creature's eyes followed her, fixed and unblinking. It tilted its head, mimicking curiosity. Every instinct in her screamed danger, but her fear was mixed with sorrow. Joren's voice called again, pleading, terrified. The creature was using him, trapping him, learning him. Lysa realized she couldn't just fight fear. She had to fight with cleverness, with truth. Lysa scanned the room, looking for anything she could use. On the dresser lay a small mirror from Joren's mother. An idea sparked. She grabbed it and held it up toward the creature. The moment its reflection hit the glass, it flinched, almost violently. The whispering stopped for a heartbeat. Lysa's own voice trembled as she shouted, "It's not real. You don't belong here." The creature twisted, trying to avoid the mirror's reflection, its limbs bending faster, more violently. Shadows flickered against the walls, stretching as if the room itself was alive. She remembered something she read in old local legends. Creatures that mimic voices. Fear mirrors because mirrors reflect truth, not lies. The whispered voices screeched in panic. For a second, she heard Joren's real voice mixed with the echoes. He cried, "Lysa, help me." That was all Lysa needed. Her fear became action. She took a step closer, holding the mirror high to reflect the light from the hall, forcing the creature to retreat. It hissed a sound that was not human. The creature recoiled, bending backward unnaturally, twisting like a ragged puppet. Its attempt to imitate Joren faltered. Its voice became harsh, broken, imperfect. Lysa used that moment to enter the room fully, holding the mirror in one hand and the knife in the other. She scanned the corners and the bed. No Joren. He wasn't on the floor. He wasn't under the bed. Panic struck again. "Where is he?" she whispered. The shadows shifted violently, then the creature's face froze in one exact mimic of Joren's terrified expression. From the corner of the room, a small figure crouched behind the dresser. Joren, pale, trembling, silent. Lysa ran to him and grabbed his arm. He looked at her, eyes wide, as if waking from a nightmare. She whispered, "We're getting out. Now." The creature shrieked, a sound like cracking wood, then lunged forward. Its limbs stretched impossibly, but the mirror's reflection cut through it, and it twisted back, recoiling as though burned. Lysa pulled Joren toward the door, but the room seemed endless. The shadows stretched, trying to block their path. Lysa forced herself to keep moving, dragging Joren with her. Each step felt like the house itself was resisting them. The mirror in her hand reflected the thing again, and every reflection made it hesitate, buying them time. She felt Joren's small hand tighten around hers as they reached the hallway. Then a sound froze her blood. The creature whispered her name. "Lysa, don't leave." She ignored it, charging forward. At the front door, she paused for a second and glanced back. The creature was melting into the shadows, its form bending, twisting, and learning from every move she made. It was patient, waiting, knowing it could try again. She opened the door, and the cold night air rushed in. Lysa and Joren ran through the yard, never looking back. Behind them, the creature did not follow, at least not yet. It waited, learning. By the time they reached the main road, gasping and exhausted, Lysa knew one thing. This was not over. It had learned their names, their faces, their fears, and tomorrow night, I will try again. The next morning, Lysa didn't sleep. Every creak of her floorboards, every rustle outside made her heart jump. She sat at her desk, staring at her phone, trying to convince herself that the creature had gone, or at least wouldn't come until night. But deep down, she knew better. Joren sat across from her, silent, pale, staring at the floor like he was afraid to breathe. The silence between them wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, full of the memory of the night before. "It's not real," Lysa whispered to herself, trying to stay calm. "It's just someone messing with us." But Joren didn't respond. He just shook his head. "It knows where we are," he said finally, voice low and trembling. "Even if we leave, it'll follow. It's in the trees, it's in the shadows, and it learns, every time." Lysa felt bile rise in her throat. She wanted to argue, to say that it was impossible, but deep down she knew the truth. Whatever that thing was, it had been hunting them, learning them, and it wouldn't stop. By nightfall, they decided to run. Not far, just enough to get to a small ranger station near the edge of town. Joren insisted the creature couldn't leave the town entirely. It thrived on the mountains, the pines, the shadows. They packed lightly, grabbing flashlights, a backpack with a few essentials, and the mirror Lysa had used before. As they moved through the trees, the forest seemed alive in a way that made Lysa's skin crawl. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of wind sounded like a warning. And then a faint rustle happened behind them. Soft footsteps mimicking their own. Lysa froze. The creature was following them. Not running, not walking, just matching them perfectly. Every time they stopped, it stopped. Every time they moved, it moved. Joren's hand shook in hers. "It knows our steps now. It knows our rhythm," he whispered. They quickened their pace. Shadows clung to the trees like thick smoke, and the wind carried faint echoes of their voices calling back at them. Wrong, twisted, broken. When they finally reached the ranger station, it was nearly deserted. A single night ranger, old and weary, looked up at them as they burst in, gasping for air. Lysa tried to explain, but the words sounded insane even as she spoke. "We need help. There's someone learning voices, faces, shadows. It's hunting us." The ranger squinted. "Voices, faces. What? Kid, are you joking?" Joren spoke up, trembling, and described the creature. He talked about the tall, bent limbs, the shifting face, the whispering voice. The ranger's expression didn't change at first. Then he leaned back and whispered, "You mean a skinwalker, don't you?" Lysa and Joren stared at him. He continued, "Not many believe in them these days. But there are stories always in the mountains, the pines. They mimic, they learn, and they hunt. And if it's learned your voices, it won't leave. Not until it's ready." The words made Lysa's blood run cold. They were in the right place, but she realized help might not be enough. Not yet. The ranger offered them a room for the night, warning them to lock all doors and windows. They huddled together, fear pressing so close it hurt. The forest outside the station was too quiet, but Lysa knew better. She could feel the thing outside, patient, biding its time. Hours passed. Midnight arrived. The shadows outside seemed thicker than normal. Then came the sound of a slow knock at the ranger station door. Lysa's heart froze. She whispered to Joren to stay silent. Another knock, louder this time. And then, faintly, a voice called out Joren's voice. Lysa, let me in. She wanted to cry, to scream, to throw herself at him. But it wasn't Joren. She could hear it now, layering Joren's voice with her own, as if the creature was practicing. The knocks continued, slow, deliberate, and chilling. The ranger went to check the door. He opened it, expecting maybe a lost hiker or animal. Nothing. Only the forest, only the wind. And then he realized there were footprints, backward. They ended at the door and vanished into nothing. The ranger slammed the door and bolted it, but the whispers continued outside, floating through the vents, through cracks, through the thick walls. Lysa wrapped herself around Joren, whispering promises she didn't feel sure she could keep. Hours passed. Exhaustion overtook them, and sleep came reluctantly, shallow and uneasy. But when Lysa woke, she realized something worse. The creature hadn't left. Its shadow lingered in the corner of the room, a bending, crooked silhouette. And worse, Joren's face was pale, drawn, silent. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. The thing outside had learned, it had adapted, and she understood in that terrible, quiet moment the creature wouldn't give up until it had both of them, mind, body, and voice. The forest had followed them here. The shadows had followed them here. And the echo taker was patient. Night fell faster than usual at the ranger station. The wind outside shrieked through the pines, bending branches like skeletal fingers. Lysa stayed awake, clutching Joren's hand, every nerve screaming that the creature was near. Hours passed, then a low, rasping sound drifted from the vents. At first it sounded like the hum of machinery, but then it formed into Joren's voice, calling her name. Lysa, come closer. Her chest constricted, and she shook him awake. Joren's eyes were wide, pupils dilated in terror. It's coming, he whispered. It doesn't just follow us. It enters through the cracks, through sound. Lysa swallowed hard. Her mind raced. How do you fight something that could copy your own voice, your own face, and your worst fears? She gripped the mirror from before, the one that had hurt it once, but the fear in her chest told her it wasn't enough this time. The thing had adapted, grown smarter, stronger, and it wasn't just calling them anymore. It was singing, whispering, breathing from inside the very walls. The whispering grew louder, filling every corner of the small station room. Lysa clutched the mirror, holding it between her and the shadows, trying to catch any reflection that could give her a warning. Then she heard a sound that made her stomach drop. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Too long for a human. They were pacing inside the walls, inside the floor, inside the very air around them. Then she saw it through the crack beneath the door. A crooked, pale hand, bending at unnatural angles, pressed against the wood. The shadow behind it pulsed, forming a torso, then a head, and from its chest came the sound, a perfect combination of Joren's voice, her own, and a low, grinding tone that sounded almost alive. We are here. Lysa staggered backward. Joren whispered, it's inside now. Not just the shadows, not just the voice, inside me too. She realized, with a chill she could not shake, that it was reaching through everything, learning every rhythm, every breath, every fear, and it wanted more. Lysa remembered something she had read in the old folklore book at the library about creatures that mimic humans. They learned the heart, the voice, the mind, then used it against the living. If you confronted them directly, they could copy, twist, and trap you. But if you used mirrors, lights, and sound differently, you could confuse them, weaken them. She grabbed the flashlight and pointed it at the walls, swinging it slowly so the shadows would fracture. The creature shrieked a sound that cracked the air like shattered glass. Its torso twisted unnaturally as it recoiled from the light. Lysa's hands shook, but she forced herself to raise the mirror, reflecting the flashlight toward its form. The reflection hit it directly in the chest. For a second, she thought it would vanish entirely, but instead, it stopped, frozen for a heartbeat. Then it lunged, not at her, but at Joren. She screamed, throwing the mirror at its twisted form. The glass hit it, scraping, fracturing, and the creature shrieked again, a sound that carried Joren's terror perfectly. Joren fell backward, clutching his chest, gasping. The thing writhed, stretching limbs, bending joints in ways that no human could. Its face shifted into a broken version of Joren's screaming expression. Lysa ran to him, pulling him away from the corner of the room where the creature pressed against the walls, trying to reach them both at once. Its whispers escalated into a cacophony of voices, overlapping, echoing, calling their names in pleading, mocking tones. Lysa realized that it wasn't just hunting their bodies. It was hunting their identities, their names, their voices, their fears. She could see it learning faster, adapting to every move. There was no escape unless they confronted it directly. She whispered to Joren, "We have to force it into the mirror reflection. It's the only way to contain it." Joren shook his head weakly. "I'm scared. What if it kills us?" She squeezed his hand. "We're stronger than we think. Together." The creature's head twitched toward them. Its torso bent, stretching, trying to imitate a human running, a human begging, a human screaming. Its chest rose and fell unnaturally, producing every voice they knew. Lysa took a deep breath. She stood, holding the mirror high, shaking, and shouted, "You don't belong here. You are not human. You will not have us." The creature paused. Its form quivered as if uncertain. Its voice wavered. For the first time, it faltered. Lysa swung the mirror down toward it, forcing its reflection across the floor, walls, and ceiling. The creature shrieked in all the voices it had stolen Joren's, hers, the ranger's, even her mother's from old memories, and recoiled, writhing, twisting, until it collapsed into the corner like a broken puppet. Joren fell to his knees, coughing, trembling. Lysa's hands were sore and shaking, but she held him close. The forest outside was silent. The wind had stopped. The shadows seemed still for the first time in days, but they both knew that this creature was patient. It had learned, it had adapted, and it would not stop forever. They had won the night, but the war wasn't over. Somewhere in the dark folds of Alder Ridge, the echo-taker waited, watching, learning, remembering every name it had ever heard. The morning after the confrontation, the ranger station felt empty. Lysa and Joren sat huddled together, watching the pale sun rise over Alder Ridge. Everything seemed quiet, too quiet. Lysa's hands still shook from the previous night, and Joren's eyes were hollow, haunted by memories she couldn't imagine. The creature hadn't followed them through the station doors last night, but she could still feel its presence, like a cold hand brushing the back of her neck. They didn't speak much, only whispered, as if sound itself might bring the thing back. Outside, the forest seemed normal, almost peaceful. Birds chirped, the wind moved through the pines, and the world appeared untouched. But they both knew that the echo-taker had not disappeared. It was patient, waiting, learning, and perhaps one day it would try again. Lysa glanced at Joren. "Do you think it's gone?" she asked softly. Joren shook his head. "No, it's never really gone. But maybe it's resting, or thinking, or planning." He didn't finish the sentence. Lysa held his hand tighter, squeezing, promising silently that they wouldn't face it alone. They left the station slowly, moving together toward town. The streets of Alder Ridge looked ordinary, but the shadows seemed longer, darker, almost watching. Lysa and Joren didn't speak unless necessary. Every footstep echoed like a warning. When they reached the town library, they went straight to the folklore section, searching for anything they could use if the creature returned. Books about skinwalkers, shapeshifters, and ancient echo hunters lay dusty and forgotten. Lysa ran her fingers across the pages, reading aloud fragments to Joren. They can't tolerate mirrors, lights, and loud sounds all at once. They learn quickly, but reflection keeps them confused. Joren's hands were trembling. "Then we have a chance," he said quietly. They spent hours gathering mirrors, flashlights, and anything that could help them if the echo taker returned. For the first time in days, Lysa felt a small flicker of hope. They weren't powerless. Night came again, and with it the forest seemed to lean closer to town. Lysa and Joren returned home, carrying mirrors and flashlights ready to defend themselves. The house was quiet, peaceful, yet the memory of the creature pressed against their minds. Hours passed without incident. Then came the faintest whisper, so soft it could almost be mistaken for the wind. "Lysa, Joren." They froze. Lysa held up a mirror and Joren gripped the flashlight. The shadows in the room shifted unnaturally, stretching along the walls. The thing had returned not fully, but testing. Its voice was still fractured, still broken, but growing more confident, more bold. Lysa whispered, "We're ready this time. We know you. You can't fool us." The creature paused, studying, then retreated slightly into the dark corner of the room. It hissed, a sound filled with every voice it had stolen. Hours passed as they kept their guard. The creature did not attack directly. It lurked, moved, tested, whispered, always learning. Lysa and Joren stood firm, mirrors reflecting light into every corner, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Slowly, the night wore on. The creature's voice grew weaker, uncertain. It had learned from them, yes, but it had also realized that this time they were ready. Their courage, their cleverness, their refusal to panic had created boundaries it could not easily cross. Finally, in the deepest hour before dawn, the thing let out a final screech, a mix of voices crying in frustration, confusion, and fury. It retreated from the room entirely, melting into shadows, leaving nothing but cold air and the faint smell of damp earth. Lysa exhaled slowly, trembling, and sank to the floor. Joren collapsed beside her. The creature was gone for now. Morning light poured through the windows. The forest looked ordinary again, the shadows ordinary, the wind gentle. Lysa and Joren sat together in silence, exhausted but alive. They had survived, and for now, the echo taker had been held at bay. But they both knew this was not the end. The creature was patient. It waited in the folds of darkness, in the echoes of their voices, in the wind rustling through Alder Ridge. One day, it might return, and when it did, they would be ready. They had mirrors, flashlights, knowledge, and each other. They would not be alone. And in that moment, Lysa realized something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it. Together they stepped outside into the sunlight, hearts heavy but determined, knowing they had survived the first encounter with the creature that stole voices, that learned names, that haunted shadows. They didn't know if they would ever feel completely safe again, but they knew they had won this night, and that was enough.